I'm going to show you a man saying he lives in the Dominican Republic for under $1,000 a month, and then I'm going to show you why he's lying. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Thanks for watching. My name's Jamie Gruber. I quit my high-paying job back in 2021 and moved with my wife and kids to the Dominican Republic in 2022. And I share everything about quitting that job, living my dream, and everything in between on this channel. Today, I'm going to share with you a guy I really enjoy watching on YouTube. His name is Tommy Bryson, and he lived in Puerto Rico and now in the Dominican Republic. He is of Dominican descent, and he shared a video recently about expenses 1 year after living here. Now, in this video, he says that he's living for under $1,000 a month, but then it's clear that he's not. This is actually a great video. He's not truly lying, but what he does in this video is break down how he's living, at the expense he's living, and then what he learned about the real expense of living here. So check this out.
So it is official. It has been about a year since I moved over here to DR, the Dominican Republic. And by the way, when I first got here, I had this entire budget in my head. I'm only gonna spend this much, okay? Now, something happens after you've been in a place for a while. You have a lot more data and information to actually say, hey, here is how much money I've actually been spending, okay? And by the way, I have spent a lot more money than I thought I was going to spend.
All right, there it is. Let's start there. If you're watching me on Instagram or watching me on YouTube, I put out all the time, and we're going to get deeper into this, but I talk about all the time, it is way more expensive. It is way more expensive than you think it is. If you're going to move down here and live for like, oh, we live on 8 pennies a month or whatever, it's not real. And the reality is we can plan that. And I did. When I moved down here, I wasn't thinking I was going to spend double my US budget. Double. But we are. Creep happens. Could we cut some things for sure? But I can't wait. I can't wait to dive into this. Wait till you see what he talks about and what you learn from him. But listen, by the way, the mission for me, and I might reiterate this or regurgitate it, either one throughout the video, is not to like, hey, look at me, I spend so much money, or It's I don't want people moving here under false pretenses and picking up their families and their lives and saying, oh my God, I spend $5,000 or $7,000 a month in the US scraping by for $500 or $1,500 or $2,000 or $3,000 or even $4,000. I can move my family down there and live comfortably. No, you can't. Keep watching.
But it's not because the cost of living is higher, it's just because I've actually wanted to spend more money. In this video, I'll cover everything, okay? I'll cover the bare necessities, and I've also covered exactly how much money I spent on things I actually just want to spend money on, okay? So,
all right, the cost of living is higher. I'm gonna refute that right now. The cost of living is higher than you may think. Just watch.
Okay, so I'll try to make this video as detailed as I possibly can. If you guys don't know me, my name is Tommy Bryson. If you do know me, well, you guys, welcome back to the channel, okay? Now, the very first thing is this, guys, all right? Now, I have something called a baseline budget. My baseline budget tells me exactly how much money I need to maintain my lifestyle where I actually am. And by the way, here in the Dominican Republic, you have these 4 or actually 6 core expenses overall, and they're gonna be shelter, utilities, groceries, transportation, and on top of that, also healthcare and also fun, because you do.
Now notice something for those of you out there with families. 2 major expenses not included in there. 1, education. 2, kids. They're friggin' pricey. We all know this. So already we know this is a single guy living in the Dominican Republic. Let's keep watching.
Now, my rent actually has gone down over the year. And you might say, well, how is that possible? Did they call you and offer you to actually take less money? The answer is no. You know, I get paid with US currency, and the US currency has gone up, but my rent has stayed fixed. So basically saying my rent actually went down because it takes less US dollars to pay my rent now, which is actually pretty cool. So I pay
I'm paying my rent in US dollars. Maybe I should pay in pesos.
I pay about 9,000 pesos where I actually live right now. And as you can imagine, right, that basically means that when the dollar used to be about like 55 pesos, well, 55 pesos make $1. Well, now that used to be like about like 163. But now I pay like around, I think the dollar is up like around to 56 56 like 30. So now I pay about $159. And that's
Just for what it's worth, today, as I record this, it's right around 58 pesos per dollar.
paying about $4 less in rent. Is it a big deal? The answer is no, but it matters to me, and that's why I put it here. Now, this also means that the opposite could happen. If the US dollar loses value, then obviously I'm going to be paying with more US dollars to cover my rent costs, okay? So that's the first thing. By the way, what apartment do you have? I'll actually go around right now and show you a video of this messy apartment because I actually want to show you guys, okay? So right here, I'm actually recording. As you can actually see right here is actually my face, and I'm actually gonna step back and basically take you around. This right here is my actual studio. As you guys can actually see, it's like a 1-bedroom type thing. And I only have about 2 bedrooms, I should add that. And basically, this is the bathroom. I'm not gonna show you that. This is the living room, which is actually a mess right now, but it's a small little living room for the most part. You have the kitchen, which is also a mess. I'm a guy, so I just leave all the cabinets always open. It's like my rule. And I also have my bedroom, which I won't show you, but it's basically 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and also like a balcony. And for that, I'm basically paying about $160 a month, or the equivalent of 9,000 pesos. As far as electricity and water, I don't pay those here. And also, for example, I do pay though gas, which is like every 6 months, like maybe like 40 bucks or like 20 bucks or whatever. And then I also have my internet bill and my phone bill. I have 2 phone bills, one in the US and one over here because I want to keep my number. In the US, I pay $6, and over here, I pay about $21 for my phone bill. And
Okay, let's dive into a couple of things here, and I've covered this in a previous video, but he does not pay electric and he does not pay water. If you're moving here with a family, you're probably going to pay those expenses. That's one. 2, I'm really curious where he's living for $160. My guess is it's a pretty remote spot. It's a nice little apartment. It's a pretty remote spot that's probably a pain to go do things. And if you're coming here with kids and a family, I don't know if this is where you want to live. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm going to guess it's off the grid a little bit. It's a Mocha or somewhere like outside of Costanza or Jarabacoa, outside of Jarabacoa, not even in Jarabacoa, right? Like, I'm going to guess he's sort of middle of nowhere if he's paying $160 a month, maybe out on the southwest part of the island. I don't know. But not paying for electric, not paying for water. Those things are going to be paid for likely by you. Now, his phone, for him, 1 line. He keeps his US number at $6. I guess he's got like a base plan there. And then here he has his plan for, I think he said $14 a month. Again, how much data do you need? How many people in your family? How many phone lines do you need? That stuff adds up. It starts to add up. So single guy living in the middle of nowhere can afford $160 a month. But can you, if you're moving here with a family or a kid or a married couple or whatever, and where are you planning to live, especially if you come from the States or Canada, you going back to where your family came from, middle of nowhere, or are you going to want to be a bit more on the grid, a Santiago, Santo Domingo, Punta Cana, Cabarete, something like that? It's going to be more. Let's keep going.
my internet bill is about $50, okay? So I don't spend that much money on utilities. My food though, if I wanted to eat at home, I could spend like $200 a month. But I like going out and eating.
By himself, if he ate at home, $200 a month.
Food, okay? Then you also have, for example, my entire like transportation. I use my mom's car.
By himself, $500 a month on food by going out to eat a little bit more and eating some at home. Now, if you're with a family, you're probably not going to go out as much, but you hear this, right? It's $800 a month baseline for him to go out and eat food. $800 a month baseline for him to get food, I should say, groceries, eating in his own home, not going out all the time for one guy.
Then you also have, for example, my entire like transportation. I use my mom's car, and if I didn't use her car, I would just buy my own car and I would pay cash for it. But just on gas, I spent about $250. Gas here is almost about 300 pesos per gallon. It's about like $5.30, something like that, okay? The US is like $3.50. It's almost like 60% higher here for gas. And here, you do end up driving a lot more because most things where I live, they're a lot further away. And you can tell that because basically, I don't pay that much money in rent. Thus, where I live, it's not like a fancy place like where I actually grew up, okay? And
there you go. So he lives somewhere, he's saying, like, not too fancy. I don't know what fancy means to him, but let's keep going.
that's basically why. But overall, guys, I spend a total amount of about $995 a month living here. And if I actually wanted to cut back and just basically eat at home, I would spend about like $695. But overall, it's still less than $1,000. Now,
it's not less than $1,000. You're going to drive your mom's car when you move here? If you're going to drive your mom's car and you don't have any maintenance expense, you don't have the cost of buying it, it's not less than $1,000. Just keep that in mind. That one point. We'll get into more.
Is this realistic? The answer is not really. I spend a little bit more, because I do take about 5 to 10% of my money to just like buy things on Amazon and just like have more fun. If I do want to travel, I do travel every now and then, and that's also a cost. Okay, so all these things do factor in, but for the most part, I could easily just live here on less than $1,000. Now, there are some things that I basically like, and there are some things that I don't like. Okay, something I do like is basically I do have hired help here in my home. Okay, so I do pay for someone to come in the house and basically do my laundry and clean the house. That's about $40 a month. I am not kidding. However, though, it depends on where you live. If you live somewhere else, you would actually be paying close to like about $200 or $150 or $300. But where I live, I just pay $40.
There you go. So I love his video. I'm busting him a little bit, but really he's very honest, very raw. I believe everything he's saying, the pricing and everything else like that. I love that he said it's not really realistic. He just said it to live under $1,000. And if you think about what he did say, like if he lived for $600, $700, $800 a month, he does nothing. He's sitting at home all the time. He's eating food in the home. Like, I don't know. That's not living to me. That's existing. Like, you can exist for less money, sure, but he's not living. And there's an expense he's going to talk about that he did not cover that he doesn't incur that would actually drive him even higher. So we'll get to that in a second here. But I love the honesty in the video and the point he just made. Hired help. We spend, I think it's like $500 or $400 a month for a full-time Monday through Friday person that comes in and does laundry, cooking, cleaning, and she does our babysitting as well. So we spend like $400 to $500 a month on her for sure. We actually also bring in a lady on the weekends that just comes in for a few hours. I think she's another $100 or $200 a month or something like that. But we're in Punta Cana. It's more expensive, to his point, versus wherever he might be. I wish I knew where he was.
I also have someone come like once a week to actually do my meal preps for me, and that's about $90 to $100 every single month.
All right, so there you go. So I get people saying to me like, "Oh my God, you're paying $400 or $500. That's so much." But like he just said, he's a single guy. He's got somebody coming in to clean for him. The $10 a week, by the way, is like once a week, and then he's got somebody coming in to meal prep once a week for him, and he's spending over $100 just on that. Like, our lady does all of it for a family of 4 in a much larger home. Our home is, I think, about 400 square meters, about 4,000 square feet. It's a much larger home with a full family, and she's here Monday through Friday, and she babysits our kids. Like $400 or $500 a month, I think, is very fair, even though some people say, "Oh, you're resetting the market. Should only be $300. And our neighbors do pay less, but we don't.
I'm telling you, okay? It's something I do like. The labor here is cheaper, but it's only cheaper when you compare it relative to what it would actually cost you in the US, but you're not living in the US, so it's not cheaper, it's normal.
I love this point because I hear this from people who are like, "Oh my God, you're paying slave wage." Like, you're coming from a different place, a different perspective. The lady we pay $500 a month to is building a 6-unit apartment building on her income. Like, that's the going rate, and that's what she can do. She can take that money and leverage it and budget and so on and so forth, and she does, right? So I'm not saying that, oh, it's perfectly fine. They live a great life. But to be honest with you, she probably sleeps better at night than I do. I'm stressing about bills and taxes and this, that, and the other. But she is absolutely able to make it on that income here. So it's exactly what he said. It's not like cheaper. It's just cheaper relative to what we would be used to in the United States.
It takes a while to get that in your head, but it is the truth.
It does.
There are some things that I don't like about living here that I actually see a lot more frequently now that I have been here for like a year, okay? So number one, at least where I live, everything is really far away. So if I want to go to the movies, if I want to go to a restaurant, it's like at least a 40 to an hour drive.
There you go. All right. I love that. He's making the point I made before. He lives in the middle of nowhere. To go to a restaurant is a 40-minute to an hour drive. Like, I can walk to him. So I pay the cost of that. This is up to you. When you move here, what is the ideal for you? Is it to be middle of nowhere, put your family in the car, 40 minutes, an hour to go to a restaurant or a movie theater or a playground or whatever? Or are you looking for conveniences like you would find in Santiago, Santo Domingo, Cabarete, Puerto Plata, Punta Cana? That's up to you. We chose Punta Cana. We spend more for sure as a result of that decision, but everything's right here. we pay way less in gas. We probably pay like $100 a month in gas versus his $250 because we have access to everything, but we pay more in everything else that we do. So keep that in mind as you're considering moving.
I don't like that, okay? I could fix that by living somewhere else, but I do like where I live, okay? So it's like, I don't like it, but I'm not really willing to change it at this very moment right now, okay? Now, number two, prices of US brands are a lot more expensive, okay? So I basically go to the grocery store sometimes in the capital. There's like a Price Mart, like the equivalent of Costco. And if you're gonna buy something there, like to buy strawberries that are packaged and like things that are packaged like in US branding, it's like at least like almost like 100% markup sometimes, I feel, okay? Because it's so much more expensive.
The point is you can find all that, but he's right. Like at the convenience of it, you go to a grocery store, there's a major markup on American brands. And be honest with you, many of us are used to some of these American brands, or our kids are, and they're going to want that. Now, can you change that? Absolutely. I just want you to be realistic, like with your budget. Are you really going to make wholesale changes to your lifestyle? Or when push comes to shove and the kid's melting down because they want this brand, are you just going to go buy it? Think about that for a second.
Okay, things that have labels are so much more expensive when they come from the US, okay? Now, I could easily get around this just by buying just like the local stuff, and that's basically it. But even things like fruits are more expensive. Things like meats are more expensive. Food overall is just more expensive here in the Dominican Republic, especially if you want to get quality foods and so on, okay? So keep that in mind.
That's it, quality foods. Keep that in mind, like you said.
Drive like crazy, and I really mean that. So you have a lot of people that drive motorcycles here, so it can be dangerous. And I do think it's like one of the places where you have like the most deadly accidents. Like just like in this 1 year, I think I've seen actually 2 bodies on the floor, like that people have not made it back home, okay? So that does happen. I have gotten a lot more better at driving, and it's a mix between being defensive and also aggressive. So you get used to it. But when you come from the US where things are a little bit more organized, to here, you have to get used to how people drive here. And you do get better at it. And if you can drive here, you can drive literally anywhere on this planet, even in India. Now, number 4 is, you have...
I agree. Oh my God, this is such a great point. He's right. I think it's a 24% higher fatality rate of accidents here than anywhere in the world. The highest death rate on the highways, on the roadways are here. And people do drive crazy. Some things we've done to mitigate. His point about driving offensively and defensively, here's something that I've always said about Dominican drivers, and maybe some of you can relate. Drop it in the comments. It is go first, look second. So in the US, you think about it, you look over your shoulder or you look out before you pull out. Here it's go first, look second. Not only with driving, but with walking, pedestrians walking across the street. I can't tell you how many times a pedestrian walks up right to the curb, like right to like where I am. I'm braking because they're just not looking. They walk with full speed to the curb and then stop and look. And it's like, Jesus, like if my mirror was any closer, I would have taken off their hand or whatever. But there's just not awareness of the road here. My wife was in a car once a few years ago before we moved here, where a little boy just like 8, 9 years old just stepped out into the road into the side of the car that she was in. She wasn't driving. And the kid broke his leg. Like there's just the culture around here doesn't respect, the traffic. We were going up to Cabarete recently and this truck rolled into a ditch. Like it took, I think like 2 hours for us to move again. A crane had to come and pull it out. And when we got by it, it was sort of like kids don't look, one of those moments. So I'm with him. It's terrible. So some things we've done to mitigate. One, I understand go first, look second. So when I see a vehicle on the side of the road, I am doubly, triply cautious. I try to move over if there's room for that, or I slow and watch the entire way. That's one. 2 is I drive only during the daytime whenever possible. Only is a stretch. We've driven at night. We've gotten like later than we wanted to be. Just going into Santo Domingo the other day, we drove in at night and it freaks me out to some extent. Not because of traffic, but just at night you can't see the lights on bikes and cars that don't have them. It's nuts. If there's a dangerous part about living in DR, it's not that people are going to hurt you or harm you walking down the street. There's property crime and all of that. But the dangerous part of living here is the driving if you're not careful. So we drive during the day. I keep an eye on vehicles that are on the side of the road. I know they're going to go before they look. They all do it. That's 2. And then his point about balancing offense and defense, I'm the same way. Like, for instance, if I'm driving along on a 2-way road, right, and there's a car in front of me, a larger vehicle in front of me that traffic in the oncoming side may not be able to see me, I stay a good distance back because On the other side, if they want to pass somebody, they see this big vehicle. Soon as that big vehicle is out of their view, they move into the oncoming lane. And if I'm right there behind them and they couldn't see me, it's going to be a tragedy. I stay back 7-8 car lengths from a bigger vehicle, knowing that the traffic in the oncoming lane can't see me. So I make this point, like if you ask me about one thing that scares you about living in the Dominican Republic, it has been the driving. To his point, I'm kind of used to it. I am used to it. I've driven in Higüey, Santiago, Santo Domingo, Cabarete, the North Shore. I've driven all over the island, and I'm fine with it now. But it does take some adjusting, and I think it's just one of those things that I'm fine with it, but I'm never comfortable, and I don't think anybody should ever be comfortable. This is a problem here.
Now, number 4 is you have to learn how to negotiate, because here prices are just not fixed, okay? Especially when people think you come from the US, they will ask you for more money because they think that you don't actually know about anything, okay? So you have to negotiate even when something seems like a good deal, because there's always room for negotiation, okay? It's just how the culture is here. You have to negotiate, or if you don't, you will be taken advantage of, okay?
100%. Landed at the airport many times, and I live within minutes of the airport, like across the street. A cabbie came up to me, and I said, I need a cab. How much? And he's like, $30, $30 to go across the street. And I was like, no, I told you where I'm going. No, I'll pay you $5. And he's like, no, sir, you can't. It's $30. I mean, it's such a distance. Like, no, I live here. Just so you know, I live here. You know, mi casa is acá, or something like that, I said. So I told him I was going to walk, and he's like, oh, you can't walk. I'm like, watch me. And it came down to like $7 or $8 or whatever I ended up paying, which is still probably too much. But at a certain point, it's like, I don't want to walk. I'll pay an extra couple bucks premium here. But everything, when it's not listed, when you don't see a price listed on a menu or your electric bill or your rent or whatever, but if you're just going to like local shops or a salon, if you're a woman, you're going to get your hair done, there's no prices posted, sure, if they sense that you've got any means, the price goes up.
Now, number 5, I think, if you want to buy stuff on Amazon, it will cost you more money. So I actually have to call like a courier here. I use Domex, that's what it's called. And when I buy things on Amazon, it arrives at Miami. From Miami, they receive it and they bring it here. Per pound, I'm paying about like 250 pesos, or the equivalent of almost about like $4.50. Okay, so if I order something that's like 2 pounds, automatically I'm paying like $9 extra just to receive it, okay? Even though Amazon shipping might be free, it's not free to actually get it over here. That's kind of crazy. So
that's big. We use BM Cargo. I'll put the logo here. Domex, BM Cargo, same sort of company, but it's the same thing. Ships to Miami, then ships here. We pay price. We actually walk over, because it's close to us, to our local BM Cargo office, and there's an app where they say, hey, it's here. Here's the price that you have to pay for each, and it's a few bucks to his point, depending on what we order.
Do miss that, but it is what it is, okay? Then you also have, for example, there is a massive difference when it comes to poverty here, because poverty here is not like poverty in the US, okay? In the US, you're poor. You just can't buy certain things, okay? But here you're poor and you might be starving, okay? So you do see this drastic difference from poor areas where people are basically like starving, things are not good, and rich areas where people basically have everything. You do see these highly differentiated things, okay? Also, one big thing is you never really feel safe to walk out at night, okay? So that's just maybe where I live and where I go around. But even like in the rich areas, for example, unless you live like in a massive closed neighborhood, for the most part, it's usually not safe to be walking out at night, because you do have, for example, petty theft and robberies and so on. But it doesn't mean it's like not safe. You can still drive around, it's fine, but you have to be vigilant, okay? That's I don't want to scare you, but it's just what it is, okay? When you have...
This is a great point. I want to go back to the poverty piece. Anybody watching this, if you've ever been to the Dominican, you know what that poverty looks like. I mean, if you go into some of these neighborhoods, like I live in Punta Cana. Punta Cana overall is very well done. It's very well developed, but there are neighborhoods like Verón, like Friusa, that are what he's talking about. Like you can drive through there and see people in one-room shacks with dirt floors and like a light bulb that may work, that live there and spend money on rent there. Like we've seen this, we've driven by this, we've gone through those areas for sure. It's there. And look, I've done some stuff with a local charity called Second Mile Missions to try to help end that. That's one of their missions, is to end poverty in the Dominican Republic. So I'll do my part, but it exists. So I say that to say this point without it sounding insensitive, but that's one of the things that I'm glad my kids get to see. I'm not glad that people are in extreme poverty. Let me be very clear. But I'm glad that they get to see that there's another side to this world. Like these people that were born into poverty, they were just born there, right? Like my kids could have been born there, or they could have been born as my kids, or I could have been born somewhere else. I talk about the birth lottery all the time. Like people are just born in Haiti, and God, what's happening over there is terrible. People are just born in the United States, and they get all the advantages of having the U.S. passport and U.S. citizenship. So I'm always really sensitive to that. And I see my kids being able to see this major perspective shift of like, these people, these folks are just, they're like you and me. They just want to get up. They want to do a good job. They want to make some money. They want to take care of their family. But this is the situation that they're in. And there's, life doesn't all look like Punta Cana, the parts that I live in at least. So the poverty is real, and it is sad to see. And it's one of the things that my kids wouldn't get to see living in the United States. That perspective to me is important for whatever that's worth. Not why we moved here, but it is important. As far as safety, I agree with most of what he said. It really depends on where you live and where you are. I think you have to be vigilant. No matter where you live, you have to be vigilant. You don't want to walk alone at night anywhere in the world, I think. When you live in large gated communities like Punta Cana Village, Punta Cana, or Vista Cana, or whatever, you can walk around inside of those gates without an issue, more than likely. Casa de Campo, so on and so forth. I'll be honest, if I had to walk from the airport up into Cortecito at night, I'm sure I'd be a little freaked out, but I probably would be okay. That's a Punta Cana specific thing. Maybe in Santo Domingo, you've got some areas like Piantini. If people that live there would say, yeah, if I stayed in there, I'd probably be all right. Probably. Doesn't mean you would be, absolutely. You might face somebody who sees an opportunity to rob you. But like he said, it's not to scare you. And honestly, I don't know, I have kids. We don't go out at night that much anyway. But driving around is never an issue. Like when we drive up to Los Corrales, Cortecito, or even Higüey, where my wife is from, like in the car, we're good. I mean, God forbid something happens. I suppose something bad could come across, or we can meet the wrong person, but we could also meet the right person. That would be very helpful. And I think that story is more persistent than, oh, my car broke down and then I got robbed, right? I think it's more like my car broke down and this person helped me, more than the other side of it. So anyway, all of that is to say he's right. You got to be vigilant. Safety is a concern. I honestly don't feel any less safe here than I did in the United States. In fact, because of mass shootings and things like that, I feel safer here than I do in the United States, because that's just like random. Anybody can, no matter where you are, at a Super Bowl party or at your local town's downtown festival, you could be part of a mass shooting. That doesn't happen here. So from that perspective, safety's more here. But yeah, looking like me walking around at night,
poverty and things happen in the US, but when I lived in the Bronx, for example, in a very dangerous place, I walked anytime, I just never really felt like at risk. Maybe that was just because I got used to it. But here, for example, it's different, it's just a little bit more different, because walking at night, it's just a little bit strange, right? So you gotta be very careful for the most part, and I don't recommend it. Getting paid for accidents and so on. I had like a car accident here. Somebody hit me, and it's like a problem to get paid and to get people to pay you. Most things are resolved like without really using insurance, because most people actually don't have insurance. Okay, so keep that in mind. And by the way, things are more expensive as far as like when you eat out, because there is like an 18% tax when you eat things out. Like sales or whatever. Like when you're dining or whatever. And there's also like a 10% sometimes, like a manual like what's it called, a manual tip. So you might be looking at it easily, like you go out to buy something and you're paying an extra 28% automatically, like between taxes and tip, that are actually mandatory, and you have no negotiation room around them. Okay, so keep those things in mind. Now there are some things that I have not done here that I should have done, and those are actually, I haven't gotten health insurance yet, and
my health insurance is $293 a month for family of 4. He could probably get away for it for $50 or so a month. But again, are you going to drive your mom's car and not get insurance with your family? Then yeah, your expenses will be lower.
Get it 100%. I've been a little lazy with that, but I am looking at getting health insurance. If you guys are interested in a video about that, like the best health insurance to actually get in Dominican Republic, let me know and I'll make a video on that. On top of that, also, I haven't paid taxes yet, so I don't know what that experience is actually like, but that is coming up for next year. So when that does happen, I'll tell you more about that too. And lastly, guys, the question is, Tommy, you live here for cheaper. There are things you like. There are some things you don't like. I kind of like highlighted those, because I'm being honest, but are you going to keep living here? The answer is absolutely. For me, Dominican Republic is home, and home is not perfect. And even when I lived in the US, in the Bronx, or I lived in Puerto Rico, or I lived, for example, in the British Virgin Islands, there's nowhere, man, where things are going to be perfect. It is never perfect. But here, for example, I love my culture. I love my people. I love my friends. I love my family. I love where I live, but there are some cons, and you kind of just have to take it with like what it is, you know? So for the most part, I'm not really going anywhere for this very moment right now. I'm pretty happy where I'm at, okay? And I can't really talk about, for example, the educational system, because you can say, for example, well, education here sucks, you know, but it really doesn't. You know, I know people here that are 10 times smarter than people that I knew in the US. And there's also, for example, private school, and there's also like great help. So for the most part, I don't think you're really going to be missing out on anything here. And I
agree with that on education. Where I disagree a bit is public education here isn't rated great, but again, that's really up to the parent, no matter where you are. Private education is great here. Our kids are in private school, and a lot of kids are. Even like middle-class Dominicans send their kids to private school. Like private is very, very common, but there are a lot of kids here that just don't go to school or don't have access to school, or the public system doesn't have room for them. That's where I think education is one of the bigger issues here. Also, I don't see education on a lot of different dockets or a lot of different proposals from government. It's just not a high priority right now. Other things are transportation, economic growth, safety, corruption, which is all great. You can't bite every bite out of the apple all at once. But education is something that I think DR is going to need to come to grips with at some point in order for it to fully develop as a power. But for those watching this video, you're not somebody making $500 a month or $300 a month in Mocha, right? Like that's not who you are. You're making 40, 50, 60, 80, 100, $200,000 a year in the US, and you could take some of that income or retirement income or work remotely and make a good chunk of that here. You'll be fine in the private system. Actually, you'll be more than fine in the private system. I believe the private system here, the schools that we go to, and I've done some videos on this, are excellent. Like multilingual, multinational, great education. I've had a great experience here for our kids. So that's the point on education. As far as the not leaving here, same with us. Like we came for a year and we've stayed 2, and we're staying another year. So we're sort of like, as we go, we'll see. I'm sure at some point we'll probably return to the US. Maybe not. Who knows? But the thing I've learned about here, like he's from here, my wife is as well. So there's a cultural anchor. But more than that, even if you're not, I feel like in the US, maybe Canada, probably Europe, developed nations, like here, I'll give you this visual example, right? So like, I think there's sort of like this happening there. So you've got like conservative, liberal, and they're all anchored under this individual, Biden, Trump, or Trudeau, and whoever the hell the anti-Trudeau is, or whoever it might be, right? Like we believe in that person. We believe in that person. They're going to be the ones to fix it. And here's what we believe. We stay underneath that person's umbrella and we shout over at the other side. So like there's a cultural and personal divide between people in like the US and Canada right now. Like we're very polarized. Here it's this way. It's sort of like as a people, we all want the same things. We want safe, we want prosperity, we want the ability to feed our kids, and we're all aligned. There's sort of like maybe it's religion, it's faith in God, it's something that keeps people bonded here, and then where their distrust is government overall, which I think is the right way to be. I think the US would benefit from that. Like Trump, Biden, neither of these people are your prophet. But what is true is no matter who's in office, they're all corrupt. They're all a mess. All politicians are. But somehow we've gotten to this point where we have this trust in a politician in the US, whereas here the trust and the faith and the interconnectedness is amongst the people, and their distrust is of government, and they want to hold government accountable. To me, that's a better system. So that's a reason why I feel like he's saying like, yeah, well, here's some of the cons. Nowhere's perfect, but man, culturally here, that's something I've noticed, that people are bonded against the power as opposed to selecting which power is altruistic and right and then shouting at the other side about how their power is wrong.
And I do think that if you come here, if you're not really careful with your budget, you will end up spending a lot more money because it is easier to spend more money. And there is one last drawback, okay? So for me personally, here where I live, you do end up having to walk around with cash most of the time, okay? Because cash is basically king. Some places you go to, they don't take card, and that doesn't really happen like in Punta Cana or like the capital, but in some places, like you do have to have cash at all times. So always carrying around cash is like super important. But for the most part, I like it here, man. It's been a year and it's nice. I like it. Would I buy a place here? Not for the next year or 2 years or 3 years potentially, while I see things around and I know exactly where I want to live. Last time I lived in Puerto Rico, I bought a home way too early, and I'm not thinking about buying a home right now because the rents are kind of like cheap. Even if I tried to move to the capital, I would pay like 25,000 pesos or the equivalent of about like $500 or so, which will push my cost of living a lot higher because I will have to pay for other things there, but it's still low enough where it wouldn't justify me actually buying a home just for the sake of having a home. Okay, so
great point, and that's up to everybody. We're in the same spot. We moved here for a year and rented, and now we're looking. Now we understand where we'd want to live, what we'd want to do, and all of that. Now we're looking. We're finding it's freaking expensive. So we're figuring out exactly how to finance it without selling our U.S. house. And also, he made this point about credit cards versus cash. There's very few places in a Punta Cana, Santo Domingo where you can't use a credit card for whatever that's worth. That's what we use. I use a Marriott card, and I get a bunch of points on it. So when we go stay someplace, it's free, and there's no international fees for me to use it. There's some places that are cash, but we go to the ATM, we take the money out, and then we know where those are at this point. You just kind of figure that out. But when you're choosing on where you're going to live, that's a factor. Do you want to live in a place where it's all cash? And that's fine if you do with your family coming from the United States or Canada. Or are you going to live someplace that has the access for you to be able to use your card and live kind of as you are in the Western world at this point? So look, the point on this whole thing is from a cost of living perspective, the amount of money you spend in a given month is going to be determined by the conditions under which you seek to live. But even this guy who's living, as he says, for $600 a month if he did nothing but pay rent and buy food at the grocery store or whatever, he admits it sounds like if he got health insurance, if he bought a car, going out, traveling, all of that stuff, as you add it up, I'm doing this tally, he's probably between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. Wouldn't you agree? If he goes out to eat, he says his expenses are $955. Do you think that the additional expenses of travel, had he bought a car, health insurance, he's going to pay taxes, whatever that is at least $500 more a month? Drop it in the comments, because if you agree with me that living a casual lifestyle in one of the cheapest parts in the country, an hour away from a restaurant, as he says, is $1,500 a month, what do you think it is to live in Punta Cana or Santo Domingo or Santiago with a family? More phone lines, more food, education, private school, maybe a second car insurance. He's borrowing his mom's car. Good for him. I think it's awesome. He's smart. He's financially very smart to do so. But if you're thinking about moving here, please listen to what he just said and everything in between, all the stuff in between what he said, and you'll see that even a single guy living in the middle of nowhere, an hour away from everything, probably comfortably is going to spend $1,000 to $1,500 a month before you even get into the cost of education for kids. If you're traveling here, moving here by yourself, here's your guy. But if you're moving with any semblance of a family, or if you're a married couple and you've lived in the States for the last 40 years and you're retiring, just something tells me you're not going to want to live in a $160 studio apartment, which may not have AC based on the fan that he had in the living room. I don't know. He's got a little shine on his head too. Maybe he's sweaty. Maybe there's no AC in that room. But just be mindful of that. If you're curious about real estate and where to live, if you're moving to Punta Cana, I did this video over here that talks about each neighborhood in the Punta Cana area and the best ones to live in based on your socioeconomic status and your lifestyle status at this point. Check it out. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.